Okay, so let's talk about the test first because your test is on Friday. It is 40 multiple choice questions and 2 written questions. And if you want, you should probably get your notes out. I am going to go through a list of topics and basically tell you how many of the 40 multiple choice questions are from that topic. Of course, we're recording this, so you'll be able to watch it later if you miss something. But please, I encourage you, if I say a topic, feel free to raise your hand or chime in and ask me, like, what do I mean by that topic? Or something along those lines if the term seems unusual. And then once I talk about the different topics and how many multiple choice questions I have on each topic, then I'm going to give you just kind of a brief description of the written questions. There's 2 written questions. And then from there, there's a few things that I will encourage you to work on, and you'll basically have the rest of class to do that. So it'll be kind of a short video to watch when you go back to it. Okay, so, and this is fairly along the order that we discuss these things in. Sometimes, you know, a few topics might get flip-flopped compared to the order that we talked about them in class, but there are 2 questions on water and its structure and behavior. So water, the structure and behavior, we got 2 questions. From there, we have properties of water. And I've got 3 questions about that. And just tell me a property of water. Anybody?
Cohesive.
Yeah, the idea of cohesion and adhesion. Or specific heat. And all of them are connected to the fact that it's a polar molecule and polarity. That's right. Okay. The concepts hydrophilic and hydrophobic. There is one question where I kind of reference those 2 ideas. I have one question on solutions in general. The idea of solutes and solvents, how they interact. So solutions. I'm not sure we mentioned it directly in class, but in your reading there was a section on buffers, pH buffers, that you should be familiar with, because I have one question that deals with buffers. I wonder if you can hear Laser on the video. Totally ruined my video. pH. I have 2 questions. And I know we only had 1 quiz. I intended to give you 2 quizzes, but timing issues kind of did not allow for that. The quiz we took had a lot of water properties and pH questions kind of on it. That's kind of the focus of that first quiz we had. So going back and looking at some of those questions would help with a lot of those. All right, and then we got into kind of the biomolecule section. So I have 2 questions kind of on biomolecules in general. And a lot of that is related to like monomer, polymer ideas. So general biomolecule questions. What were the 4 biomolecules we talked about? Lipids were one. Proteins, carbohydrates, and nucleic acids, which all of those have their own set of questions that I'll tell you about. The Miller-Urey experiment. There's one question. I had a slide on it. We talked about it, and there will be a question that references that one. Isomers I have 3 questions about isomers. There's 1 question that is related to the number of bonds, the number of covalent bonds that carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen can make, CHON. We talked about those 4 elements quite a bit. And I do have a question where knowing how many bonds each one makes is the focus of the question. There are 5 questions about functional groups. Which there's a chart that I referenced on one slide. I would be, as familiar as you can with the functional groups on that chart. There are 2 questions about the dehydration and hydrolysis, dehydration synthesis and hydrolysis reactions. And again, they're probably related to one of the biomolecules, but the focus is more on the reactions on 2 of those questions. There are 2 questions on polymers, which you really can't talk about polymers without talking about monomers as well. And I know some of this stuff is kind of vague, but I would definitely know with the polymers like carbohydrates, glucose is a common monomer, things along those lines. 4 questions on lipids. 4 questions on proteins, which includes the primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary structure concept. But the structure of a protein is kind of integral to proteins in general, but there's 4 questions on proteins. And then I know it was a shorter lecture at the very end, and I guess I didn't realize I asked this many, but I think the last 6 questions all focus on nucleic acids, so DNA and RNA. That's probably a question or 2 more than I had intended to ask, but even though we didn't talk a whole lot about them, there was quite a bit of detail in those. And then with the written questions, there's 2 written questions. And both written questions reference biomolecules, especially the monomers of them versus the polymers, and how dehydration reactions can build them or hydrolysis reactions can separate them, and the function of in general what they do for living things. So the numbers I gave you on the multiple choice should add up to 40. I double checked it. So I hope it adds up to 40. And there's the 2 written. So you will have a 70-minute class period. If you're taking it in here, we'll get started as quickly as possible. I'll probably go ahead and put the test out. And for most classes, you won't have to rush off to the next class too quickly. I think this class is actually last thing in the day, so I try to leave a little, 10-minute buffer in there for finishing up some of these questions. But if you're assuming 70 minutes, I would definitely break down the test. Something like, a minute on each multiple choice question is probably plenty of time. That's 40 minutes that I would probably spend on that. And then you have 30 minutes remaining. 15 minutes on each written question, I think, is ample time to read the question and to respond, because these are not going to be long essays. You might have to diagram something in a general way, or a list and bullet point. I don't even really ask for complete sentences, things like that. So I would not call them essay, just written response. So, having said that, and we'll stop the recording in just 1 second, I would look over that list and compare it to your notes, flip through your notes, maybe go through the slides that are posted, and compare the slides you've seen, the notes you've taken in reading and in class, compare them to what the general topics are. I will say that some questions are kind of just as simple as, what is a function of this? Or look at this molecule, what is it? There are some that are more straightforward, and I don't want to call them lower level, but they don't require an incredible amount of depth. You kind of will know it or you won't know it. And then there are other questions where it's not that cut and dry. You might have to consider what you know and then develop an answer from there. But it would still be multiple choice. It's just not as simple as, what's the definition for this term? I try not to do a lot of that. To help you with those kinds of questions, I have another AP Classroom assignment. I think it's 18 multiple choice questions in which you can see questions that go a little deeper. I would, if you can, go back to the previous 2 AP Classroom assignments and maybe look back over them, even if you already did them. If you haven't done any of them, or there's one or some questions on 1 or 2 of them that you still need to do, you have time today to go through all of those questions, but you don't have to do that. I would say the priority is finishing the building biomolecules activity that is linked on your coursework page, and I still have the kits if you still need to build some stuff. So we have 50 minutes or so. We have quite a bit of time, and I would probably, in order priority, make sure that your activity, building biomolecules, is done, that you have looked over your notes and your notes are done and complete, and then work on any AP Classroom practice problems that you have. So you can stop the recording.